All right, peeps. On today's episode of The Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of Bugie, never leaves the door, lots of, oh, you think Bugie is for emergency situations? Well, show me a fight that you've been in that was not an emergency. Send us the video. Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Hello, Sifu. How are you today?
Good, good. So according to you, I'm full of piss and vinegar today, right?
Oh, yes, you are.
So it is a Saturday morning.
You are.
I picked you up, and
Yes.
you're going on and on with
I got
Mikey
in the
here.
car and I was just like, what's up, Sifu? How you doing this morning? You were like, hey, Dre, what's up, man?
I got that KFG energy.
Yeah,
and
what's
also,
up with that?
if you have a car as nice as mine, it wakes you up in the morning.
Wake me
you can't
up.
drive. You can't drive my car and not feel like
that
the world is yours.
invigoration.
Yes, yes.
Which is why you're never going to drive his car.
That's right. You'll never drive my car.
You can never drive my
1987
car.
Pinto, by the way. All right. Yeah, exhilarating.
Oh, stop
Exhilarating.
Exhilarating.
Stop it.
So here we are for another episode of The Kung Fu Genius.
Hot topics.
Hot topics. I just have been informed by our sound guy and quasi-manager, quasi-diva in training, that we are coming up on the end of our
This
third
is
season.
so true.
Yeah.
It's so bananas, too.
Yes. So that means that we are almost done with the third
3
year of KFG,
seasons?
right?
Yeah.
So that is...
don't-
that
Sorry,
is
coffee
wild.
was calling.
Sense.
Yes,
Yes.
we are very close to the end
So
of
we
the
want to
third
do
year.
something special for the finale.
What's that?
And
We're going to
our
ritually
boy-
sacrifice Dre.
Our boy AJ on Instagram had a great idea. All
What's
right,
this
AJ
idea?
the podcaster on
Yes.
IG. He said we should do a Jeopardy style game show.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. So I like
Our
so
love's in jeopardy.
babe. So I know
Yeah.
the format.
Okay.
Because throughout, especially this third year, Mikey's had to he's had to
he's
substitute
done.
for you more often because you were off living in another world for a little bit.
Yeah.
Being a
And
suburban dad.
being suburban dad, right?
SD
Traitor.
50s.
Yes. And so now we have
Traitor.
we have a bunch of Mikey episodes and we have a bunch of Dre episodes.
Wow.
So what I'm gonna try to do, and hopefully with some help from the audience.
Topher, we're looking at you.
Yes. So I'm going to start looking.
Yeah.
But the Kung Fu world keeps me quite busy. So if our listeners can help us, from season 3, that is from episode 104, because that would be the end of the second year. So let's say episode 105
So
on up to the current one.
Okay.
All right, because that's all kind of season 3. Questions from things that were talked about in the episode. So we can have...
only in season 3, though.
Yeah, we're going to have... Yeah, because, dude, come on, you don't remember anything from season 1, do you? All right.
Doesn't remember anything from
Dan Lee
season
secretly
3.
recorded conversation,
I
right?
don't remember
Okay.
shit
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
yesterday.
Yes. So we'll do like a season 3 kind of recap, right?
This is
And
gonna
it'll
be
be questions. So,
interesting.
for example, there'll be 3 categories of questions.
Yeah.
Okay. There'll be one category of questions, which are topics and things that were discussed in episodes where Dre was the co-host.
Okay.
The second
few.
The second category
Okay.
are topics and facts and things that were discussed while Mikey was the co-host of the
Damn,
episode.
this is interesting.
The third category can be topics and facts and things that were discussed during interviews where neither one of you were my co-host. And so what I'm thinking is we can come up with a point system. All right.
Damn.
So we'll have one camera on the 2 EUs. All right. Or maybe we'll get real fancy and do 3 cameras.
Ooh, we could do
All right.
that.
And then so we have one on you, one on Mikey, and I'll be the host because it doesn't make sense to ask me questions. All right. I know
Right,
all this
you
shit.
know all this
right?
shit already.
And as Sifu Langting would say, I have downloaded all the shits. All right. And so
He
I
says
will.
this?
Yeah, he says they download all the shits. All right. So that's one of his famous lines. So I'll have a card with all the questions,
All right.
and I'll ask them. They'll be all mixed up. And I'll say like, okay, this is an interview category. All right, this is a Dre category. This is a Mikey category.
Can we
right?
get the theme song
Now
up
here's
in
the
there?
thing.
Yeah, we can get the thing.
No,
Yeah.
I think we'll get demonetized for using that. It's probably proprietary.
No,
all that
what I'll
stuff.
do is I'll re-record it, but like with kung fu
with
sounds.
like a Bon Tempi.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's
you could
recorded on a
just-
Bon Tempi.
You
anyway.
just say it. You just hum. Do, do, do,
I'll just record.
right? You just record that.
Yeah.
And
That's how
there
you
go.
circumvent it.
That's how we circumvent all that, right? Okay, so if you Dre answer a question, a Dre question, we'll say it's like 5 points.
Okay.
Because you were there. You should know
I
it.
should know it.
But let's say you, Dre, answer a Mikey question,
Damn.
because I know sure as shit you never watch the episodes where you're not the co-host. All right? Then it'll be 10 points if you answer a Mikey question, vice versa. So Mikey will get 5 points if he
That-
answers a Mikey question, but
Okay.
he'll get 10 points if he answers a Dre question, although admittedly it's a little slanted in his favor for two reasons.
Because he's at every episode.
One, because he's at every episode
Yeah.
doing the sound too, and he also remembers shit.
Under 3,
All right.
actually, I watch all the episodes.
Yeah,
afterwards
so
like that.
he has, unlike Dre, like cannot be bothered by any of this stuff,
I've
right?
literally watched all the KFG
Yes.
Hey,
episodes.
there's
So-
a lot of like celebrities or actors like Denzel. He never watches anything he makes. A bunch of actors do that. Robert De Niro doesn't watch any
so
movies
you are
he makes.
you are comparing what you do here at this podcast. Let me get this straight. You're
No,
comparing
I'm
your
not
contribution
the
to this
least.
podcast
I
to
am
Robert
not.
De Niro.
I am not.
To
Yes, you
Denzel
are.
Washington.
I am not.
You are
But
putting
what I'm
yourself on the same
saying
level
is-
as Denzel.
So then what am I?
What I'm saying is,
You know he's only a hair away from comparing himself to Jesus.
there's a lot.
Yes, yes.
Yo,
You know what I mean?
did y'all
Nah, actually,
see?
more Nelson Mandela,
Did y'all
actually.
see Escaping Twin Flames on Netflix?
No.
No, nice pivot, by the way.
I know. Let's
See
get
it.
this off of my
See it.
divishness.
See it.
All right.
Okay.
See it.
You know what I'm watching? I'm watching something that like everyone has been telling me to watch for a dog's age, but I didn't get to it.
What?
I'm watching Barry.
Oh, Barry's great.
Yeah, I just finished the first season. It's
Oh yeah,
really
I still have
Barry?
to watch
What
the
is
third
Barry?
season, but
It's-
the first, it's amazing.
really good. Yeah,
On
yeah.
what?
Yeah, it's
What
on
platform?
HBO.
Oh, okay.
It's with Bill Hader from SNL.
Okay.
It's so good.
I have not heard of Barry.
What it's like? It's like a comedy version of Dexter set in LA.
Yes, yeah. It's great. It's really great.
It's so
really
good.
Great. So before we get started, just want to remind everyone that the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius podcast
Best way.
is on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to episodes early, as well as additional goodies that are not otherwise posted here on the KFG channel. And higher levels of support get all sorts of additional goodies, including private episode with me, secretly recorded private episode with the KFG. That's
what's up.
That's right. And so go ahead, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius. Link is in the description below. All right, Dre. So we are going to do another Ask Me Anything episode, although as these since lately we've been doing it from our Patreons. We usually just get to one question per episode, which I like because I prefer these deep dives over kind of the lightning round. And our Patreons ask really good questions. Like they ask full episode worthy questions as opposed to like, short answered questions, right? The kind of questions you would ask me, for example, right?
Right.
That's
That's what I do best.
Do you cut your fingernails when you do kung fu? All
I'm
right,
always
yes
and no. Yes and
All right,
no.
exactly.
I'm
That's
all
your
about them
answer.
yes and no's.
Next question, right? So we have a Patreon question. Let's
We're
hear
going
it,
right
Trey.
into it.
We're going right into it. Yeah, no more jibber jabber. We already. In the 5 minutes, 6
Right.
minutes since this episode's been going on, we've already realized that you consider yourself the Denzel Washington of the KFG podcast.
Yes, man. That movie he does, The Tranquilizers are good, man. I love those.
Tranquilizer.
What?
That would be a great, like, you know how, like, especially in the 90s,
I love those movies.
They would have those parodies, like the Wayans brothers did all those, like, the Scream parodies,
Yes.
like Scary Movie and stuff
They're
like that.
so good.
That'd be funny to have a movie called The Tranquilizer, and it, like, parodies, like, The Equalizer
Yeah.
and all, like,
Oh, it'd
these,
be great.
Taken and all those movies, right? The Tranquilizer.
He just turns up to do his like kind of like big fights, and then he just like injects himself and falls asleep.
All right, Dreidel, what you got for me?
Thank you. Oh, this is from Mr. Hope.
Mr. Hope, yeah, had another great question for us a few weeks back.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And he's saying, thank you for answering my question about opponent sticking in cheese out.
Oh, yeah, that was I make my opponent stick to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny. There was one comment.
Yeah, what was that comment?
YouTube comments are so funny because, for the most part, the comments are like, yeah, great episode, or, people, chime in with their own ideas. But then there's always some anonymous guy in the comments,
Right.
Not a real profile photo,
No.
his handle is, Chuckle Sticks 97,
Of course not, with a Muppet photo.
Yeah, with the Swedish chef as his photo or whatever, right?
All right.
And then it's like, that would, and you can always, what's funny about comments?
Uh-huh.
They're like, kind of three general categories of comments.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's subcategories in terms of the tone and stuff, but there's three types of comments you get.
What are these three types?
Okay, one, the people who watch the episode and comment.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second one is the people who are commenting while watching the episode, and they will often comment
the
multiple
gun.
times. Yeah, they'll jump the gun,
Yeah.
be like, "Yo, no way!" And then the next comment's like, "Oh yeah, it totally makes sense what you said there." Like they're commenting while it's going on live, even though it's not a live video.
Yeah.
And like it's so funny because you'll get a bunch of comments where you're like, "What is this guy talking about?" And then his next comment is like, "Oh, I see what you said there." And then the third type of
You
comment.
answer my question.
The third type of comment is the person who didn't, which I'm surprised. I'm surprised, but I suppose I shouldn't be shocked. The third category is the people who don't watch the episode and just saw the thumbnail or the, they just see the thumbnail. And, we try to make the thumbnails provocative because that's what draws people watching the video, right? But it's not necessarily accurate to what we say in,
Not necessarily, no.
You know what I mean? It's like that one we did a few weeks ago, which was like, the KFG, discusses Bruce Lee's Wing Chun modifications, and I look like I'm all pissed off. And you watch the video, I'm not pissed off. Why would I be pissed off about Bruce Lee? He's my boy.
Yeah.
But you have to do it that way, otherwise, because if people feel there's no snark or whatever, they're not. Everyone needs this a little bit of the 10 reasons why your Wing Chun. Like if I wrote 10 ways to improve your Wing Chun, or I wrote 10 reasons why your Wing Chun sucks. The 10 reasons why your Wing Chun sucks would be the one that people would click on.
Yeah.
It's like a weird thing, right?
People want that.
So there's always these comments of people who clearly only read the title and didn't actually watch the episode. So we had the episode where we answered Mr. Hope's last question, which was like, do I believe in the Wing Chun motto of, at first I stick to my opponent, and then in advanced levels or higher up or later or whatever, my opponent has to stick to me or whatever. Yeah. And then we talked about that, and we talked about, the meanings behind some of these sayings and all that kind of stuff. And there was a guy that said, "No way this would work on me. No one can stick to me. Like I would back away and keep distance and all that stuff." And it's like, dude, that's literally not at all what we're talking about. But it's amazing
Too
how.
good.
But it's amazing
good.
how.
All caps?
No, but it's amazing how solipsistic and narcissistic the average person is. We all suffer from it a little bit, but there's you see something like a thumbnail or a title, and people automatically feel like this is talking to them or about them or saying something to them.
Yeah.
And it's like, no one here knows who you are. You were not part of you were not a factor in the decision committee to make this episode title.
We're lasered in on you. We're talking about you.
But people are like, "What? It wouldn't work on me." And it's like, it isn't about whether this thing would work or not.
Right.
It's about whether these type of sayings, what is the relative value of these old maxims, right? These old sayings. Like some of them are conceptual, some of them are technical, some of them might be made up, some of them might just be pie in the sky bullshit. Like I think that one is a pie in the sky bullshit one. But it's just so funny that you have people who watch the episode and comment, people who comment while the episode is going on, and their first few comments are
That's me.
Are
I'm
uncooked,
I'm that
right?
guy.
I'm not talking about it in the live chat. I'm talking about like in the comments, right?
Yeah.
And those guys, what I like about that second group is they'll comment 5 times. So we'll get a bunch more comments when the guy's like, yo, man, I don't know. What do you mean here? And then like, oh, my bad. Now I see what you meant. And it's like, and he's basically having a conversation with himself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because no one's talking to him.
No one
right?
responded in between his 5 comments.
But people feel like, oh no, like, you know, this is about me or I'm part of this, right? And
it's great.
I think it's just really fun. And the guys who just comment like, oh, no, I actually believe a majority of the Bruce Lee drug letter comments are from people who didn't really watch the video. Because the people who get like really salty and think it was a personal attack clearly didn't really watch it because that's not the vibe at all. But anyway, let's go with our new question here.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know Wing Chun Illustrated is now offering a paperback edition through Amazon, reaching a larger global market. And no, they're not ditching the glossy magazine edition through MagCloud. You can now simply choose the version of this magazine you prefer and the one with the cheapest shipping wherever you live. Order your copy of Wing Chun Illustrated today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping for Prime members. Go and check that out.
I appreciated the discussion on the problem of pseudo-profound sayings and their potential for misinterpretation.
Yes, me too.
So, I don't know.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's a Dre episode. Don't worry.
Yeah, don't worry.
So, in the spirit of cheesy platitudes, I'd like to follow up by asking you about the famous Wing Chun maxim, "Bu Ji But Shut Moon."
Whoa.
Wow. That
Sorry about that.
was disrespectful.
A little bit.
On all levels.
A little bit. Yeah, he could have controlled a little bit more. Yeah.
I have to say it again, right?
Yeah.
Bu Ji But Shut Moon.
Perfect Cantonese pronunciation.
I.e.
If I close my eyes, I swear I'm listening to Yip Man.
You swore.
Yeah.
You
So
swore.
I can't tell the difference.
You can't
No, I've
even
never
tell
heard his
the
voice.
difference.
I can't tell the difference.
The Bu Ji does not go out the door.
Yeah.
Okay? Many people seem to accept this as meaning simply that the Bu Ji is not shown to outsiders / non-disciples.
Right.
Does this kind of statement even have any relevance in the 21st century where a beginner can look at the form on YouTube and imitate it? What other accepted maxims could we leave in the past? Thank you as always.
That's great. No, it's a really good question. And the reason why that question resonated with me is because I am working on my Bu Ji book at the moment.
Ooh,
And I actually dedicated
gut.
dedicated an entire chapter to this question. All right, because it's a famous
You
saying.
don't say.
Yeah, it's a famous saying at least within Yip Man Wing Chun. I don't know about the other Wing Chun lineages.
Okay.
I can barely speak for my own, let alone others. The saying is Bu Ji But Chut Moon, or Bu Ji Chut Moon, depending on whether you want to use more formal or colloquial Cantonese. And so Bu Ji meaning the Bu Ji form, but it means not or doesn't. Chut means to leave or to exit. Moon is the door or the gate. All right. So the Bu Ji never leaves the door, and it's relatively uncontroversial to say that most of the Yip Man Wing Chun, diaspora around the world usually generally take that motto to mean that the Bu Ji is not shown to outsiders, or maybe not openly demonstrated, not taught to non-disciples, or not taught to people who are not yet qualified to learn it, So something along that vein, meaning the Bu Ji is something kind of special, it's in-house, and it's only for certain people, right? I remember many years ago, probably in the 90s,
When you were like 5 years old.
I wasn't 5 years old in the 90s. I graduated high school in the 90s, sir.
Shit.
All right? I'm old ass like you, okay? All right?
I'm an old ass like
yes.
you.
So, in the early days of the internet, before social media, you had all those those forums. And I remember the
Special times.
Kung Fu magazine,
Yeah.
which is now also like all the other martial art magazines, also defunct. they had an online forum. And I used to be what's known as a lurker. I used to read those things, but I never participated because.
Yeah.
But that's also why, and I read all that stuff.
Fly in the wall
before I even moved to Germany and started doing Wing Chun full time. Because I was already doing Wing Chun in the States. But I would do is I would read those online forums. And although actually maybe timeline-wise, I think the Kung Fu Magazine forum may have come while I was training in Germany, maybe not before. But I used to, in any case, I used to read those things very early on. And that's actually how I got to know a little bit about the who's who in the Wing Chun world, at least especially in the States. Like, I think Joy Chowdhury and Victor Parlati and Phil Redmond and and all these guys like that. Some of them later I got to meet. These were guys who were posting regularly. And there was, of course, as always with these kind of discussion forums, there's a lot of politics and a lot of, you know, the William Chun guys and the Larrington guys posturing against each other, and the Moyet guys talking about how traditional and pure their Wing Chun is, and the other guys telling them they can't fight, and these guys saying you're not pure, and and I would just sit back and just eat popcorn and go like, okay, but it's actually how I learned very early on.
What the Michael Jackson meme.
What the vibe of the different Wing Chun schools were. So like I would go like, okay, so you cannot speak for everyone in a certain lineage, but in general, the Moyet guys tend to be a little bit like this. The Wong Sun Leung guys tend to be a little bit like this. The Larrington guys are like this. The William Chun guys are like this. And I didn't take that just by reading one or two of the guys. Like you read like what all those guys kind of say. You're like, okay, this is their vibe. This is the hill that those guys die on. This is the hill that those guys die on. And I just wanted the information. Obviously, I was getting into Larrington Wing Chun, but I still wanted to know what the other guys were doing. I didn't have like as tribal a mentality. I didn't really become tribal about Larrington Wing Chun until I started learning from Larrington, right? And then I was kind of in his orbit for a little bit, right? Like kind of being around Emperor Palpatine, right? And then it just took me a little while to break away from that. But like prior, even while I was in WT, but prior to learning from Sifu Larrington, I really liked WT, and I thought it was one of the better representations of Wing Chun. But I wasn't like, you know, WT's the best, F the rest. I was very much interested in what the other guys were doing, right?
All right.
And so I remember in the 90s reading about people arguing about this topic, okay? And in the years since, and in all the books that I've read and all the discussions I've had, I have to say that almost every single person who mentions this beauty, but Chotmun, means it to say like, yeah, Buji wasn't taught to anyone who really wasn't qualified or didn't go out the door, so on and so forth. But there was one guy who was like, the Buji never leaves the gate, meaning like you never go outside of your gate when you do it. And
never leaves your gate, like and your in your
like
house.
because Buji, so he wasn't talking about the Buji form and the knowledge itself not leaving the door. He meant like the movements in the Buji never go outside the gate. And when I read that was years before I learned the Buji. So I just remember, because I have a photographic memory for these kind of things, right? And so, but really, like this discussion we're having here, I can tell you, like in the late '90s, I read about this on a forum before I even became so invested. But I just remember these things. Like, this is my brain.
Photographic memory.
Don't ask me what I had for dinner last night, but like, let's talk about a thread I read on some forum in the late '90s, right? Before I was like fully invested in all this stuff, right? So the one guy said, "Oh, it never leaves the gate," and blah blah blah. And I remember some guys kind of going like, "Well, that's really stupid," or whatever, because of course you have movements like Dong Faksao, which completely go outside of what you would call, unless you're now extending the gate further out. But the problem is if you then change the parameters of something to fit your definition. I mean, a definition that means all things means nothing. All right. So, so besides that one weird outlier comment, which just could have been some idiot who didn't know what he's talking about anyway, the consensus would seem to be that it really means that it's not taught to unqualifieds. All right. So I just want to put that in there because just in case people are like, well, there's another interpretation. There really isn't. And there really isn't any interpretation that makes any sense, given what the Buji is for. The Byuji is a problem-solving form. So if you imagine that the Sunam Tao and the Chamkyu, they represent the operating system of Wing Chun.
Yeah.
Okay. So the majority, and that's how we teach it here at City Wing Chun. The majority of what you need to defend yourself using Wing Chun, you find in the first two forms. The idea of simultaneous offense and defense, overwhelming offense, tracking, staying on top of your opponent, closing the gap. The primary tools, kick, punches, elbows, and knees. All this stuff is found in the first two forms, and the fundamental chi sao, pun sao, attacks, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So, if someone attacks you on the street, whether you're standing in a classical zhong sao or you're using a fence or you just have to go into action, you close the gap, you punch, you control, you stick, you clinch, you hit, and you hopefully end the fight very quickly, right? So
Hopefully.
So what then, so where does the Byuji fit in? Well, when you look at the Byuji form, just from a choreography standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of unique among the other two forms. Now, that's also a weird thing to say because the first two forms are also quite different from each other. The Sunam Tao form is stationary, and the Chamkyu form has turns and kicks and steps, right? But the Byuji form is an outlier for another reason, and the reason is that most of the movements of the Sunam Tao and Chamkyu, most, not all, tend to follow on a vertical or sagittal plane. And the Byuji is a lot more horizontal and it's a lot more curved. Okay. Yes, you obviously still have straight lines in the Byuji, but you have a curve, lots of curved lines. And what you see, if you could take like, when they take those photos where they leave the exposure on, and then you could see like in one photo like the tracers
trails.
of the other
Yeah.
movement, almost like a little bit like when Bruce Lee did his thing at the end of Fist of Fury, right? But imagine that as a photograph, all right? Well, if you did a photo like that of the Sunam Tao form, most of those blurs would be like in front of you, and it would be like here, with the exception of the double fox out, right? And then the Chamkyu form, kind of the same, but now since you're turning and moving, there's a lot more action, right? But you would see most of the lines are pretty straightforward. But when you look at the Byuji, if you were to see all of the movements of the Byuji in a blur, you would see that it fills in all the angles of movement that is not handled by Sunam Tao and Chamkyu.
Okay.
So diagonals and odd angles from this side to that side, and of course you have the bending at the end, and so it's almost like filling in the spaces and angles that the first two forms didn't have. So it's from a movement perspective, it's kind of unique in that way. It's a decidedly non-linear part of the Wing Chun system. Now, again, I'm not saying that there are not linear movements in there, but it uses a slightly different idea of how the triangle works. The Sunam Tao Chamkyu is kind of the fist comes from the heart, from the center.
Right.
So you're creating that triangle shape right from the middle, whereas the Byuji actually creates it from the side. So you're cutting the entire triangle with one hand instead of with two. I remember I thought that was just like something we did in Larrington Wing Chun because a lot of the other styles don't talk too much about their Byuji openly. But then I had a conversation with Roland Tong, one of Yip Mun's private students many, many years ago, obviously not a WT guy. And he like took me to the side and he's like, I'll tell you something that Yip Man told me. He's like, the Byuji doesn't go from the middle forward. It goes from the side like to the center, which is how we teach it, right? But that was like a big secret. Right? He's like, that way you can cut the entire triangle instead of just one half, which is exactly what we teach, right? But it was so funny because he pulled me like the youngin to the side to like give me this nugget of information.
Oh, man.
And I was very grateful to hear it because it was a confirmation of what I had learned. And of course, I didn't say what most Westerners would. I know that already. I learned that already, right? And then you would then totally shut off learning it. Like that's always the mistake Westerners make. A Chinese seafood gives you a piece of information. Oh, I knew that. And then the Chinese seafood was like, oh, well, okay. Well, I guess I have nothing to teach you. It's like, it's a pro tip if you learn from a Chinese seafood. If the Chinese seafood tells you something you already know, don't say, I learned that already. I know that already, okay? In fact, don't even do that if it's not a Chinese seafood, all right? Just listen to it from another perspective and then wait for some new information to come or expand on that information.
Yeah, I know that already.
I know. Yeah, right, I saw that already. Okay, and usually the people who are the, I saw that already, I learned that already, are the people who still can't do it. It's like, oh, well, you saw it, but you can't do it. We're shit. You can't do it in the form.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do it in fight. I don't think you can do it in chi sao. So why don't you take your yeah, and do it more, all right? What is the solution for bad horse stance? More horse stance, all right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's that old meme, all right?
No,
like horse stance, more horse stance, right? So, in the WT system, where the Buji fits in. So if you imagine that Sunum Tao and Chumkyu represents your operating system, most of what you need in Wing Chun, your controls, your pins, your hits, your swarming attacks, simultaneous offense and defense, closing the gap, all that good stuff, we teach within the curriculum of the first two forms. So what Buji does, it's a problem-solving form, okay? It fills in certain gaps, maybe movement-wise or angle-wise, that the first two forms don't discuss or follow. But it also, at least the way we teach it in WT, it provides two tracks of solutions. The one is what we call rapid resolution, okay? Which is, it sounds a little cheesy to say, like the kind of one punch, one hit knockout, because a lot of people reflexively don't believe in that stuff. And I don't believe in that stuff, to be clear. Like the idea like, oh, there's a special technique I'm going to use that's going to knock out my opponent.
Automatic.
Guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
I don't believe in that kind of stuff, all right?
Oh, my goodness.
But when we talk about rapid resolution, it means that there's certain types of strikes in the Buji form, which are, let's just say, for slightly heavier firepower. Maybe you hit someone in the face and it's not quite powerful enough because you're fighting someone who's bigger or stronger. So you need maybe some other ways of striking someone that might not make you into an undefeatable guy, but just give you a little more of an advantage than you otherwise have. Maybe not an advantage over that guy, but more an advantage than you otherwise would have, if we're going to be really open and clear about, not exaggerating claims, all right? So there's certain types of strikes in the Buji form that are, to quote my ex, nasty, all right? Okay? Janet, right? Okay? And so you don't bring her up, though, okay?
Okay.
We
won't.
You
but
you have
did.
chan saos and throat cutting hands and things like that, and that could give someone an advantage over just having a punch or a palm strike as your main striking tool. So that's one thing, this kind of rapid resolution, these nasty elbows, these nasty ways of hitting someone, all right? But of course, knowledge of the form doesn't bestow you with that skill. You learn it in the form, and then you gotta do the work, like training that strike on the wall bag, the heavy bag, in chi sao, in any way you can on focus mitts to develop it as a skill. Just pantomiming movements in a form do not mean that you suddenly have that skill. Just kind of like what we were talking about, our boy Viking Samurai. You can take 20 lessons or sessions with the best boxing coach. But that doesn't mean that now, because you learn those things in a boxing session, you now can do them.
Right.
And even if you can kind of do it, it doesn't mean you can then also do it in the stress of a real fight, because you need to take these skills, learn them step by step, develop power with them, and then eventually apply them with a resisting opponent.
Right.
All right. That's when you can do it. So it's kind of a 3-step procedure. Learn the technique, then it's develop the technique, and then it's test the technique. And Viking Samurai is in his learning the technique phase, not realizing there are 2 other phases he's got to go through before he can really say that thing is his own, right? It's the same thing, the number of people who learn the Buji form. They just learn the form. Literally,
I know Buji.
Let's like, I'm a Kung Fu guy. I'm a Wing Chun guy. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
And I have a fondness for the Kung Fu arts, all right? But let's take away our fondness and our personal attachment here for a moment, okay? There are people in the Wing Chun world that think because the lineage they're in, all right, provides them with the most authentic version of whatever form they're learning.
Rightfully so.
That by literally, and I'm going to be very clear, pantomiming movements in the air by yourself, they now have something that's going to help them fight better, okay? Simply by pantomiming movements in the air in a certain sequence. All right? It's almost as absurd as saying, like, you learned a certain dance choreography, a very specific dance choreography, and now if someone were to chase you, you could use that dance choreography to outrun them, not knowing how they're going to chase you. It would be the same kind of thing, okay? Now,
God,
of course,
yes.
I understand that's a little bit of a straw man argument, but it's against my own point. Because obviously we don't just learn the form, we then have drills to learn how to use those movements with a partner. And then we ultimately put it in the pressure cooker of sparring, Gosa, Wing Chun versus non-Wing Chun sparring, to see if you can actually use that thing, right? Yeah. So we never say because you learn the form, you have the skill. No, you learn the form, that's it.
Oh, man.
There's Wing Chun is littered with people who know forms and don't know what any of that stuff is for and cannot use it, but they'll tell you that they have the most authentic version of the form. Great. I'm going to grab you, use your Chan Sao out of your Buji, and now let's go. Boom. And you grab them, and suddenly, they've never been grabbed like that before, and they're not even thinking about the Chan Sao because, shit, they're being grabbed.
Yeah.
Because you've never actually tested this stuff out. All right? The form is just the basic movement. It would be like someone who went to an MMA school and started learning shadow boxing in the air, how to do kickboxing combinations, and then was like, all right, coach, go ahead and put me in.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. Your shadow boxing movements in the air. Uh-huh. We got to do bag work, then we got to do mitts, then we got to do sparring, then we got to work on your wrestling. It's like, slow your roll.
No, but
it's the
I
same
just
thing.
learned the ABCs. Now throw me in a spelling bee.
Exactly.
I'm
right?
ready. I'm
It's the
so
same
ready
thing.
for the
and
spelling bee.
This is a problem we have with this kind of misunderstanding of forms as being like, because in Wing Chun's very coveted. Oh, I learned the Buji. Oh, wow, that guy learned Buji. I mean, back in my day, the guys who learned Buji, you looked at them like they were rock stars. Like, that guy learned Buji. Like, wow, that guy, it's a big deal, right? Oh, that guy learned wooden dummy, right? But of course, the implication, at least in learning Wing Chun, was he learned Buji and also like the Buji Chi Sao and the sparring and how to use it, not just the form, right? Although even back then we thought just learning the form was going to make you special or whatever, right?
Right.
The form is your first tool to train the movements without the stress of someone trying to hurt you. Basically, you imagine it's your ability to sharpen the techniques without external stressors, all right? Unless you're doing the form in front of your Sifu, then you have an external stressor, right?
God. Goddamn.
So that's what we have to be very clear, is this idea that just you learned a certain sequence of waving your hands and moving your wrists and moving your legs in a certain order doesn't now necessarily bestow you with a measurable fighting skill. The fighting skill comes from learning how to use it in practice, right? So that needs to be said, because this kind of implication that like I learned the form, therefore, all right? There's a very famous Sifu. I won't say who he is.
Why not?
But let's just say if I said his name,
Yeah.
everyone who listens to our podcast would know who he was. Okay? You can go to this guy in Hong Kong, and
I think I know what you're talking about.
From zero Wing Chun training, this guy with a couple weekend seminars will teach you all the forms and the Chi Sao drills, and within 6 months will make you an instructor and a Sifu. From zero to Sifu. Okay? But what you quickly realize is this person just teaches the forms. So after 6 months, you can pantomime a Sunam Tawa Chumkyu, a Buji, dummy, maybe some awful weapon stuff, right? And you can do some, prearranged Shisa Punsao, Lapda drill, Pakda drill 1, Pakda drill 2, whatever, and a couple weird bits of footwork and 1 or 2 very dry applications and sprinkle a little pixie dust, and now you're a Sifu, right? And that's the problem, is that it's not just a misunderstanding from people looking outside of our art. It's also a misunderstanding from a number of people who are inside the art, okay? That we have to get this idea that just having learned a form puts you on a certain pedestal. Now, if the quality of instruction is very high level, like we talked about in our ranking video, right? And it takes a certain amount of skill before you're qualified to learn something, instead of just like how many Wing Chun people teach. Okay, you learn the Sunam Tao form, let me take a look. Good enough. All right, here's Chumkyu. The Chumkyu form, okay, basically knows the choreography. Here's Buji. Damn. And it's like, well, what about how to use the stuff in that form? Or are we just reducing Wing Chun now to the set list of the forms? Because that would be like reducing Wing Chun to the items on the menu, but never serving the food.
Oh, God.
Okay? So you have a menu that says hamburger, cheeseburger, but you never actually ate one, or did one, or made one. You just have a menu that has those words on it, but you've never done it. Okay? Or to use a music analogy, it's not even... The forms are not even the notes. The forms are the list of songs. But you have to play the songs and play the music. You can't just say, I have a list of 10 songs right here. Yeah, can I hear this song? No, I have a list of 10 songs right here. I want to hear that song. Can I see you do that
Just
song?
play it.
No, I have a list. That's the problem.
Play the song.
And so this is also a big issue within the Wing Chun world. Of course, it's also a problem in the other Kung Fu styles as well.
Okay.
But the Kung Fu genius stays in his lane, all right? I'm just bitching about Wing Chun here, right? So now to the question, Biuji Bat Chun Mu, the Biuji never leaves the door. Okay?
Biuji Bat Chun
So
Mun.
this is a saying that I believe was very important in the old days. Okay, in the proverbial olden days, as my daughter said. In the olden days, how did you guys get online? She literally asked me that question.
Olden days.
In the olden days, how did you get online?
The late 1900s.
Yes, exactly, right? But
Oh,
I
wow.
love the olden days, right?
I used to call it the olden days when I was a kid.
We all called it the olden days,
Absolutely.
right? And my daughters picked that up, right? Yeah. We
Mikey's
were
teaching them.
watching Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and like, this is a movie made in the olden days.
So just as an aside, someone tweeted about watching The Ring with their kids and saying how she had to explain the horrors of like VHS.
Yes, yes, exactly, right?
It's like,
Oh,
not the
wow.
actual horror of the film, just all like
wow.
the lack of
VHS.
technical stuff that was going on. 'cause it's
Press
such an
and
old
play
movie.
and rewind. And,
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right?
goodness.
Awful, and then dealing
Having
with
to
like
get up.
some static, having to use the tracking
Oh,
to get
yes.
the thing to go right.
Oh, yes. The horrors.
Yeah, the
horrors.
stuff that kids nowadays never have to deal with, right? Or like when they watch Home Alone and they're like, why can't they just text him?
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, that didn't exist back then. Oh, that's really inconvenient. You know, the same thing like, you know,
Yeah.
if Bruce Willis had a cell phone in Die Hard, like that movie's done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So,
It's amazing.
yeah, it's crazy. So they have to always come up with new stuff, right? So,
Hey, Kung Fu Genius fans, if you like what we do here, please consider supporting us on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get early access to episodes and other goodies not posted on the Kung Fu Genius channel. With higher levels of support, you can get your name in the description, a live chat with me, or at the baller level, you even get your own personal KFG episode with me as my guest. The link to our Patreon page is in the description of this episode below. Patreons have a direct link to chat with me and get first dibs on any questions for Ask Me Anything episodes. Click on the link in the description for our Patreon page for more information, and I'll see you on Patreon.
in the olden days, so let's say
In the olden
days
days.
before Yip Man, okay? Let's just make a generic time period of like in the days of Leung Jan or Chan Shan, okay? Martial art styles, they were considered like proprietary secrets of the family or the sifu that was teaching it, right? Because it has partially to do with Chinese history at that time. The development of Kung Fu styles were normally very insular, meaning like they were, you know, a certain family developed a style, they kept it within a family. Styles that are of Hakka origin, for example, would only be taught to men within the Hakka tribe.
Right.
And not
Okay.
to women generally, okay? Although there are exceptions. And the reason was because a woman in China could also marry outside of her tribe. And they didn't want their Hakka Kung Fu going to someone from who was another type of Chinese, like a Cantonese person or something like that, right? So that's why, so the women wouldn't learn it not because like, oh, women can't do Kung Fu, but because the women could be married off to outsiders. All right.
Interesting.
So that gives you an idea of what the mindset was. Now, I'm not saying it's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not saying that it
You're not
benefited.
condoning this behavior.
I'm not saying that this extremely secretive way of looking at your stuff benefited. I'm just trying to give some context, all right? That these things were considered, you know, this is how you fight, all right? And I think what they maybe didn't understand in China or in ancient times is that in general, fighting it's a human phenomenon, and there are ways that you
not
there
an AI phenomenon.
there are only certain ways that you can fight as a human being, given our anatomy, that are effective. But because, you know, the internet was really bad in the 1850s, and, you know, people
it
growing up in
sucked.
worse than
Yeah.
potato quality. It was mashed potato quality.
Oh, man. In the
and
gay
so
90s.
the idea of, you know, learning or knowing Kung Fu in rural China and having any idea of what martial arts are like in the next village, let alone the next country, let alone on the opposite side of the world, that was a non-starter. So one of the things that we've kind of seen through mixed martial arts and, you know, years of being able to watch fighting on TV, video, whatever, is, you know, how does striking work in general? How is striking effective? How is it not effective? How is defense effective? What things work for self-defense? What things work for the ring? You know, how do you kick effectively? How do you grapple? How do you keep someone from trying to wrestle you? We see all these things. Now we have access to all this information, and then we start to see, these are the things that we do really well in Wing Chun. These are the things that could be improved. Every style has done that, right?
Okay.
So, but in those days, I don't think they realized how much more unified effective martial arts are, because they were very tribal. They were all in these little communities where they created their own martial arts styles, and their martial arts style was how they protected their clan, their sect, their family. So they don't want other people learning how they're going to fight, because that was their trade secret, all right? You know, the one style is going to try to lock up your arms using the mantis hooks. The other style is going to try to, you know, grab you and throw you like Shuai Jiao. The Wing Chun guys are going to come in with rapid fire striking. The Hung Gar guys have their strong bridges. The Choi Lei Fut guys are going to come with powerful forearm swinging. And so you didn't want the other people to know too much about your style, because there were no videos, there were no TV, they weren't going to see it. So the only way they could find out is if there was someone who was too loosely showing something that they shouldn't be showing.
Over the fence.
So someone would see it. They would know, those Wing Chun guys are square. They come in this way here. So we should develop this and this to fight that. Or these Charlie Fut guys do this. So you got to do this or whatever. They only had the styles as they developed it. Now, oddly enough, most of the Chinese martial arts styles seem to have been developed by people who did have knowledge of other martial arts styles. So, for example, and I'm not condoning the bullshit fairy tale of Wing Chun.
Why not?
But if you look at most of the styles, the Southern styles at least, it's usually like so-and-so who knew this met with so-and-so who knew this, and they combine their styles together so that they could fight against this other guy, for example. And it's a very generic, non-specific example, but some variation one way or another is kind of how many of the styles developed. So that meant that the founders of the various styles were actually somewhat open-minded, because they had learned something, maybe let's just use a very generic meme, traditional Shaolin Kung Fu. Okay. And then they realized that there were certain issues using this style, whether in the case of Wing Chun, Shaolin Kung Fu required too much brute strength for a woman to use against a man, and it also required that you have to train it for so long before you can use it.
Oh, man.
So then we need to take our Shaolin Kung Fu, for example, all right? It's a generic example of which I don't believe in any specificity, any specifics of it, right? But we have to take our Shaolin knowledge and we have to condense it so we can teach it much more quickly and do it in a way that's much more effective against people who might be bigger and stronger than you, for example, right? So that meant that the founders had to have known other things and seen problems and engineered and tinkered and fixed, which is a very modern and progressive attitude. But then the moment they tinkered and fixed and like, aha, we have the antidote versus Shaolin Kung Fu. They use these wide movements. We're going to use short, tight, simultaneous offense and defense, right?
Okay.
They, chamber all the way to the waist and put everything into that one punch. And we're going to blitz them before they have a chance to even chamber their hand. We're going to focus on straight line. And if we run into their arms, we're going to stick and so on and so forth. So if you imagine, and it's obviously an oversimplification of how Wing Chun was developed, the founders developed this style looking at what the other guys did because they had access to it, because they had learned it, or they knew someone who had it, and they fix it, they come up with something, and now they have this new hypothesis of martial arts. And the moment they do this, now you can't change it, now you can't improve it, and now you can't show it to anyone else, because this is like our proprietary blend. It's the KFC's herbs and spices, and they're not going to let you know it,
Can't
right?
have that.
The Colonel, he had to mix a bunch of stuff. Till Jeff's ready to make a lot of mistakes, lots of trial and error until he got it right. And he's like, fuck it, I'm
a
not showing
dark
anyone
room,
this.
too.
I'm not showing anyone this.
Fuck that.
The supposed recipe's like locked somewhere. Same thing with like the Coca-Cola recipe or whatever, right?
Yes.
So then it becomes something like that. So what you see is that to a certain degree, the founders of the various traditional martial arts styles, Chinese Kung Fu in this case, were somewhat open and progressive in that they saw that there was a problem, because people who are very conservative never think anything they're doing is wrong. They think the best way is the old way and you can't change it.
No.
So it takes someone to go, maybe this isn't the right way. And that's kind of a very modern and progressive take on something. So maybe instead of being sideways, we should be square.
Thinking outside the box.
Maybe instead of backing away from someone, we should get really close to minimize the damage, right? Maybe we should not be imitating the movements of animals, and we should just be looking at how humans move and try to optimize that, right?
Okay.
And then they create this awesome idea, and then now it's closed. Now you can't change it. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people, very conservative strains within Wing Chun, that think that this version of the hypothesis they created in the 1850s need not be altered. And there's no corner of your life in which you think that way, except for some people in traditional martial arts. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people did not rest with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that they've had. They're constantly improving it. Wrestling is improved.
Okay.
The boxing game improves by the training methods and the way, they always try to find better ways to do it, right? And as fighters grow up now, they grow up watching years and years of footage of fighters who are the greats. So a fighter coming up now has an endless library of people who came before them to figure out, okay, this guy's got a body type like mine. This guy's got a style like mine. Let me look at what this guy does because I think I can imitate it. And now let me make it my own and change it and make it something new. You simply did not have access to this information in those days. So instead of going for this idea that we're going to look around and see what other people do, they turn it into a closed system. So no one, okay, we got this and we won't let you have it. And then that very closed idea is not just pervasive for the other people trying to come in, but it starts to grow within the family.
Wow.
That like, okay, well now you start learning it, but unless you are loyal, you've been around for a while, you've put in the time, you're not going to get this other little secretive thing. So then this idea of kind of holding these secrets then starts to grow within the style. And there are reasons for it that are mostly with Chinese culture.
What are these reasons?
Well, the reasons are you have to earn the right to learn something more advanced. And mind you, I agree with some of these things, okay? But not because of like some strict adherence to Confucian philosophy. For me, it's always a movement thing, okay? It doesn't make sense for a beginner to start whacking away on the dummy just because they saw a Jackie Chan movie, Wing Chun's on the dummy, why do I have to wait to go on the dummy? When you can't stop someone from punching you. Hey, if I fire a punch at you and you don't know how to send your hands forward or close the gap or swarm, then what you're doing on the dummy is a waste of time. Okay. So then I can say, you don't need that for now. You're not ready for that because we have to teach you how to handle people coming at you with punches and kicks, and you have to learn basic footwork and how to close the gap and how to stay square and use your hands, right? It's not that thing is such a secret that I don't want you to see it or whatever. It's just that you don't need that right now. You're not ready for it. Like we got to start. If the language analogy is always the best, right? You got to learn your ABCs, then you learn basic words, then you learn simple sentences, then you string sentences and make paragraphs, and you have conversation. All right, and it's like we can't have, but hitting whacking on a wooden dummy is like trying to have a specific conversation about the type of coffee you like with someone who doesn't know how to speak yet.
Oh, damn.
It's like, so it's not like, oh, well, we can learn to speak just by having conversation. Or we do that already at the beginning by having basic sparring, light sparring for the beginners so they can start to get, that's like learning baby phrases. But like going and hitting the one dummy and trying to do Popeyes and stuff with it, and it's like, no, that's like having an ultra specific conversation and you can't speak yet. And I'm not telling you can't do it because it's so advanced you can't talk about coffee. I'm just saying like, can we learn like how to ask for directions and how to ask for the bathroom and where's the exit before we start discussing geopolitics in this foreign language, okay? And so for me, it's just a matter of, is the student ready for it movement-wise, do they have enough of a movement vocabulary? Do they have enough experience where it even makes sense to go on to this next step? Or are they still kind of cutting their teeth with these basics, right? So I think the movements, the advanced stuff needs to be earned through practice, and it needs to be earned through understanding, not earned through this is all this secret knowledge behind this door that I'm trying to hide from you, and because of traditional reasons you can't learn it. I think that is very stupid. I think the student should be taught the thing when they're ready for it. And they're ready for it when they've trained the previous stuff to a competency, not just that they've seen it or done it a couple times. Oh, you did the Chum Q form, you're ready for Bugie? It's like that Batman Robin meme where he smacks him, right? I'm ready for you can't even apply your Chum Q, you son of a bitch,
damn.
right? That is kind of the
Wing Chun
idea,
memes.
right? So this saying that the Bugie but Chutmun or Chutmun is basically just saying, yeah, if you're not qualified to learn this, you won't learn it. And because the Bugie form, and I'll get back to my previous point, teaches certain things that are kind of considered house proprietary information, that they don't want to necessarily give that to people who are going to give that information to another tribe. Because it was all about protecting the tribe, okay? So the Bugie, like I said, it teaches 2 tracks. We talked about the first one, rapid resolution.
Oh, yes.
So the second track that Bugie teaches is how to deal with compromised situations where you're compromised or not optimized. There are people who say, Bugie teaches emergency situations. Asshole, every fight is an emergency, okay? All right, the only one who thinks, somehow you fight with a super cool head and then, I got turned sideways. I'm in an emergency now. Let me throw my Bugie. It's someone who hasn't been in a fight.
Yeah.
Someone gets in your face and says, hey, what are you looking at? What's your problem? Yeah. Not one punch is thrown, but it's a little bit of an emergency.
Oh, man.
So F out of here with the emergency techniques. Bro, if you're about to throw hands with someone or someone's about to take a swipe at you, it's an emergency. All fighting is an emergency, all right?
All of it.
And even the guy, like the bouncer who's been bouncing for 20 years, he's got ice running through his veins, and he just he's got that look like that.
Yeah.
All right?
It's still an emergency
He's still
for him.
in an emergency.
Yeah.
It's just he can handle it in a very relaxed way because he's been there many times.
Yeah.
But don't let his cool demeanor let you think that he's not an emergency, because when he gives that left hook to knock that dude out, he does it because he's done it with experience. But the fact that he had to punch that guy meant it was an emergency. All right? It's just like they're confusing a person's cool demeanor from experience with him not being in an emergency. And watch most Wing Chun people when they fight, they look like they're in an emergency, all right? Without doing Bugie. So I would implore the Bugie world, the Wing Chun world, I should say, to stop saying the Bugie teaches you emergency situations. All fighting is an emergency. What are you talking about? All right? With the Bugie, the second track of what Bugie teaches you, after giving you heavier firepower, rapid resolution, is how to deal with compromised situations or non-optimized positions. As you know, that Wing Chun is a style that focuses on, we use a squared up position, right? Because we fight very close, all right? We're not out there dancing. If you're bouncing away, back and forth, kickboxing with your partner, well, you can use a bladed stance. The guy's far away. Why do I need to be square? I can't reach him. If my opponent is so far away that I can't reach him with a punch and kick, what's the utility of having a squared up position? That's why when I see those idiots go into the MMA ring, these Wing Chun guys, and their MMA opponent is on the other side, and they're starting square like this, I go, why are you in a position that's for you using your 2 hands when the guy's a football field away from you? All right? We're talking about ring fighting. It has to be modified. You could be all squared up using all your Wing Chun tactics when you earn the right and you get over there and you're in his face. When you're far away and you're bouncing back and forth, you're wasting energy to force yourself into this position, which the situation doesn't require you to be in. That's why when you're in the ring using Wing Chun, it's a different tactic than in the street. It's totally different. And when I see a Wing Chun person in the ring, half a mile away, standing in a squared up position with his weight on the back leg, I go, you'll be knocked out in 5, 4, 3. I mean, come on, okay? Because and then people go, yeah, Wing Chun sucks or whatever. They know that this guy doesn't understand the Wing Chun tools, and he's using the wrong tool. Yeah. It's like a mechanic trying to open the hood of a car with a wrench. Yeah. Why isn't the hood opening? All right, wrong tool, buddy.
Wrong tool.
And so what we mean by compromise situations is, okay, if I want to fight square to my opponent, all right, when I'm close, of course, not when I'm far away, right? When you're far away, you're not fighting anyway. We have 3 advantages of a squared up position, okay? One is tracking, all right? If I have a squared up position as my opponent moves around, it's very easy for me to track a moving opponent at close range. 2, simultaneous offense and defense. Okay, movements like gansao, ganda, tanda, all these simultaneous actions, you can't do if you're bladed sideways because one hand doesn't reach. All right, you need to be square to be able to use simultaneous offense and defense with 2 hands. Of course, you can use simultaneous offense and defense with one arm that does both from a side-on position, but that's a topic for another day. So you have the second advantage is simultaneous offense and defense, and the third advantage of a squared-up position is overwhelming offense. So if I'm squared up to my opponent, I can go in guns blazing, chain punches, elbows, swarming, chain striking, because I'm not constantly having to turn my body back and forth every time I hit. I'm square, and with footwork and waist power and pressure, you swarm your opponent. So you have tracking, simultaneous offense and defense, and overwhelming offense. These are our bread and butter advantages of a squared up position. So what do we mean by a compromised position? When your opponent puts you in a position where you're not square. It's pretty much it.
That's it.
Okay? They could break your posture, snap your head down like in a clinch, you're bent forward. That's compromised for Wing Chun. We don't fight from that position.
Compromised.
The guy can push you where you're suddenly sideways, and now you're side on to your opponent, right? So that's what we mean by, so people call that emergency. It's like, no, you were in an emergency the whole time, all right? Now you're compromised in an emergency, all right? Yeah. So what the BUG does is it teaches you how to fight kind of off your back foot when you're side on, when you're falling backwards, when you've been pushed and you're about to fall, when your posture's been broken. And when you look at the BUG curriculum, the BUG T-Shirt, the BUG application, well, it's a lot, right? Yeah. That's why even before our students learn BUG, we have to teach them certain applications from the big winding arms where they're bent forward, because if you haven't learned BUG yet, someone still might snap your head down and put you in a guillotine. Someone still might bend you forward when they put you in a headlock. You can't say, well, I haven't learned BUG yet. I can't get out of this position, right? So for self-defense purposes, we have to teach some of the BUG stuff early on, because these are things that can very well happen in a fight before someone has had the chance to learn BUG, right? So BUG teaches rapid resolution, your heavier firepower, and it teaches you kind of ingenious, cool ways to get out of positions where you're kind of getting your ass kicked a little bit, right? Where you're losing a little bit, right? Damn. So that's why it's not just a random addition to the Wing Chun system. Sunam Tao and Chum Kyu is your operating system. And when you run into problems applying Sunam Tao and Chum Kyu, you hit the limits, the wall of what those 2 forms can give you, because you need heavier firepower or you're put in a position where you're compromised. Then the BUG is like a software patch that fixes those limits within the operating system, okay? But it doesn't replace it. You don't fight like a BUG guy. Oh, wow. Right? Some WT people think so. They're like, oh, the BUG is based on the knives. No, the knives are based on BUG, moron. Yeah, how do you know that? Yip Man said it in New Martial Hero magazine, okay? Okay, so it's like, because they're people, this is a criticism of my own lineage, that when they learn BUG, then everything they do is open-handed, and then you see like they're always doing all these kind of fancy-looking things. Like the guy gives you a punch, all right? And the simple solution in Wing Chun is pum, all right? Da sao, jik siu sao. The hitting hand is the defending hand, right? The guy comes like, bam, one action, you finish it, quick, all right? Bam, quick, fast. But within my lineage, some guys learn the BUG, and then that same punch comes in, and they step back, man sao, kam na sao, hook punch, here, maybe a Tai Sao, because that's a super important thing. Wow. And then an elbow, and then hit, and then here, and then some fancy-looking clinch with this one. And it looks cool, but one, the other guy's not really resisting. And 2, it's like, okay, let me get this straight. Homeboy threw a punch at you, and you needed 8 movements to solve it because it looked cool. If that's what your BUG is teaching you, then I'll stick with Da Sao, Jik Siu Sao. I'll stick with just hitting the guy and finishing it as quick as I can, right? So, and that's a criticism in my lineage. I look at some of the guys in Europe that when they do the Buji, it's like, the guy comes at them with a punch and they'll do a kapchang against the punch and then do a dong faksa. And it's like, well, what? Like, on what planet do you think you'd be able to pull that off?
Sexy.
All right? It looks sexy in a demonstration, but
Sexy stuff, man.
But it's trash.
Fighting is sexy.
No, it's not. All right? Not at all. All right?
Should be.
It's trash. All right? No, it's total shit.
Goodness, man.
The only people that really glorify what they can do in a fight are really people who haven't been in there. Fighting is nasty. It's really nasty. I mean, someone really trying to hurt you, and you have to defend yourself. It's about putting all your tools together and doing your best, and it's not about the consideration of trying to look good or look cool or whatever. I mean, this is for films and TV and demonstrations, but this shouldn't be filling in the students' heads of this is someone gives you like the wooden dummy's even worse. I see some guys in Europe, WT guys, the guy fires a punch, they step back, they do the mansao and the side kick from wooden dummy, and then they come in again, kamnasao, throw the guy, do this, peel his face back, punch him here with a hook punch or whatever. Like, that's all cool stuff, but the dude gave you one punch, and you just did 9 things, and the guy didn't do anything in between. There's a problem with practicing that way. One, if the guy doesn't resist, you don't learn how to adapt to a resisting opponent, all right? 2, if your opponent attacks you with one movement and you do 8 really cool looking things to them and they're still standing, how come nothing you did had any power? So the thing is, it's like, while they're going like, oh, look, dong faksao, la po, do, grab the guy's head, punch here, kick, side kick to the supporting leg, knee, swip, trip, kick him down, punch him this way here, give him an elbow here, whatever. Like, look how cool he's like. The guy didn't resist, which I'm not sure if he resisted, you'd have to use other movements. You'd have to do something according to what he did. And 2, you basically showed me that you'd hit the guy 8 times and he'd still be standing there. So either you're committing murder, okay, or nothing you're doing has any power.
Baby soft.
All right? So the problem is when I look at that kind of training and they go, this is Buji, no, this is not Buji. Because the Buji, if applied in Gosao, Chisao sparring, or Latsao, or just straight up sparring, would be there in a flash, and then it would be done, and you'd be back to your regularly scheduled program if you didn't already end the fight. You're going in, bob, and the guy pushes you, and you lose your balance. Come now, so punch, done, and then you're right back into it. Your Buji was right there where you needed it, a software patch. Yeah. And then you're right back to what you're doing. That's it. You're not now doing 10 Buji movements in a row to go, I'm applying the Buji. No, you're trying hard to look like you know what the Buji's about. So that's kind of like my issue with the way that it's often done. But when you look at in the old days where these things really were the secrets, this was how you resolved the software glitches of Sunumtao and Chumkyu. Yeah, you best bet that they're not going to teach that openly, or they're not going to teach that to a student who they think might give it to someone else. This student's a little too friendly with the guys from the Mantis group over there. Maybe not teach this guy Buji, right? No. Now, I'm not saying that
can't do that.
Is a good thing. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm just trying to explain why in Qing era China, something like that might have made sense when people are trying to protect their proprietary blend of fighting.
Right.
It might make sense in that context. It doesn't make sense on the whole for the development of the martial art. Because let's say my enemy finds out my Buji secrets. All right? They know that if they put me in this really messed up position, I have this little card up my sleeve. Oh, wow. And I can get out. So they then develop something to counter that. And when I use it, they have a counter. And the Chinese would look at that as like, oh, it's very bad. They learned how to counter your thing. But I go, now I have to learn how to counter that. You understand? This is like how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu got so good. They start adding leg locks. Now it changes how you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because you got to watch out for the guy grabbing your legs and finishing the fight and ripping your ankle or tearing your knee in half. Ooh. So now your normal jits has to be done in such a way where you're also now aware of your legs. So they're much more aware. They're much more technical. Well, if I know that some of my best Buji goodness can be countered by the guy I'm fighting, because he's also got some stuff, well, then I want to know how he counters it, because then I can, one, on the most base level, counter the counter that he has against mine, which I never saw before. But 2, I can also improve the original technique to then not be countered by that thing he came up with, right? Maybe now if I just jam his stance when I give him the Dong Faxao, he can't move around
counter.
and do this thing. So then what it allows you to do, if someone else knows some of your shit, it allows you to say, okay, but now how can I do my stuff in a way where they can't do the counter they came up with? Or if they do that counter, I now have a way to get around it and finish it, right? So then what ends up happening is your martial art becomes even better because now it's being forged and pressed in the pressure cooker of modernity and comparison, which it doesn't do when it's sequestered and kept as a secret. So the long story short, BUG never leaves the door was perhaps at one point in the history helpful. But nowadays, I think it's detrimental. And to answer the other thing you said in there, well, does it make sense now because the BUG form, you could see it on YouTube or whatever, right? It's not because of that. The fact that you can see all the forms for the most part, except the Leung Ting knives, you can't see them on YouTube. There are people that think they're demonstrating the Leung Ting knives on YouTube. No. Even when the couple clips of Leung Ting doing the bits of the Leung Ting knives, he's not even doing it right. Because he's doing it for public demonstration. When he shows little bits of the form, he's intentionally doing it wrong or whatever.
Cunning.
And all these guys in these guys who learn from Sergio or whatever, doing their knife form on there, whatever. Like this is not Leung Ting's knife form. This is like you ever make a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy?
Wow.
All right.
It just looks shit.
Yeah, that's way better than what those guys are doing. Right.
Just a copy of a copy of a copy. What's
Yes.
it called? Not generational decline. It's maybe it's generation degrading.
Something like that.
Something
right?
like that. Yeah.
So anyway, it's not that the forms are on YouTube and you can see it. Because again, like I said earlier, the secret is not on the form. If you see the BUG form, what do you know of it? What do you know? Why are they doing this thing with their hands? Well, you saw the form doesn't mean you know what it's for. Doesn't mean you know how to do it correctly. So the fact that the forms are available on YouTube, I don't think that nullifies this statement as not being true. What nullifies the statement as not being true is that we would be much better if we improved how we did things by comparing it to other people rather than trying to sequester it. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to The Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. And if you have any ideas for a future episode of KFG, go ahead and write those in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm Seagung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
So you know why he's all salty right now? He was on the phone with me all night.
Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
Hey, yo.
Yeah. Now, he was letting her know.
He's
She
gay.
fucking messes with our boy Dre, we're gonna fucking send a hit mob over there. All right. He wanted to make sure it was very clear to her.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Andrew, make sure you put this in the outtakes. All right. So,
Man, I could have gone so much further.
are you ready?
What was the second part again? All right, peeps.
All right, Dre, let's go. Yeah, he's not a one-take Jake. He's a two-take Tom.
He's an infinite take Tina.
Infinite take Tina. Wow.
Take Tina. All right, people. On today's episode, the genius.
Dre, come on,
will
let's
be-
go. Let's do some
Yeah.
real energy here, all right? Let's go.
This is my energy.
Let's get it done with, all right?
All right, people. On today's episode,
Dre.
Now, you know what? Let the painter paint. Let's see what we come up
see
with.
what we come up with.
Yeah, it's a left-handed Bob Ross.
What's in the wacky world? All right, people. On today's episode.
They're peeps. They're not people.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of The Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems. All right, peeps. On today's episode of The Kung Fu Genius, what?
I didn't say anything.
It said nothing.
I
Jesus.
said nothing.
Guys are conspiring. I see it.
He's turning into Howard Hughes, man. Pretty
Yeah.
soon he's going to be walking in here with tissue boxes for shoes.
Yeah, and keeping jars of urine.
Yeah. Well, he does that anyway, but that's a separate reason.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius. All right, peeps. On today's what? Lots of gems. Lots of beauty never leaves the door. Lots of you think fighting
It up.
is an emergency situation.
Think Shatner-like pauses are going to help you remember the
Shitner.
line. Put this up. Yeah. What time is it, Mikey? Oh, sorry. Good. Oh, okay. All right.
All right,
No, that's
peeps.
fine.
On today's episode.
Why do you go before you have clearance?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Right, peeps.
I love that. That's somehow our fault. We were
Yeah, I
still
know.
in the
I
midst
know.
of
It's
something.
like,
It
are you
is.
ready? You ready, Bill
All
Shatner?
right, peeps. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. No!
We wouldn't have used that take anyway.
It was a good take.
Dre, be a professional.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of beauty never leaves the door, lots of you think beauty is used in emergency situations. Well, my friend, show me.
That was the equivalent of him just taking a dump on the table.
Show me a fight that is not an emergency. All right, peeps.
Do you want me to do it, Dre?
I got this.
I
could
got
do
this.
it.
Yeah.
I got this.
Mikey
I
can
got
do it.
this.
Because we have you basically here for one thing, and sometimes it feels like you can't. You had one job, Dre. People are going to forget about Dre if this is how you keep going. It's like dealing with an insolent child.
Okay. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius.
I love that. He's like, it's like dealing with an insolent child. Okay. that's fair. That's a fair description of me.
Can I just do what I'm supposed to do?
I would love for
Oh,
you
we
to do
would
it.
love
We've been
that.
waiting. We've been waiting for 10 minutes.
We would love
Yeah,
that.
we'd
Just
love
let me
that.
do
I know.
this.
Can you?
Can
That's
you?
the question.
Can you?
Can you?
That's the question.
Stop calling me. The genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from Patreons. Lots of what? What?
No.
Because I stressed them.
No.
Because I stressed them.
No, you stressed the wrong emphasis.
Yeah, the word stressed is doing a lot of heavy lifting there,
That's
Dre.
right.
Lots of you think beauty is for emergency situations? Well, show me you in a fight that was not an emergency.
It's too personal, Dre.
Yeah.
Send me.
It's too personal. All right, peeps. So on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of beauty never leaving the door, lots of, oh, you think beauty's for emergency situations? Show me a fight you've been in that wasn't an emergency. Send us the video. Let's get to it. Fucking amateurs.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, cool.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of beauty never leaves the door, lots of, oh, you think fighting, damn, I keep saying emergency. You think beauty is for emergency situations? Will show me, head chopped off. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. I mean, not YouTube, the Patreons.
Oh, dear God. Oh, dear God.
Come on, man, don't leave me hanging.